like we bravely fought the menace of COVID-19. मुझे इधर एक शेर पढ़ लेता हूँ. ये जब ये कोविड का और उसके बाद ये फ्लड्स का सारा हो रहा था, उसकी मुनासिबत से है. जिसको तूफान से उलझने की हो आदत मोहसिन, ऐसी कश्ती को समंदर भी दुआ देते हैं, और हमारी कश्ती पार लगी. So Sindh carried the maximum burden in the country for both COVID and flood and faced disproportionate devastation in 2022, with 1,000 people dying and around 8,000 injured. Significantly affected the houses, transport, agriculture, irrigation and communication infrastructure. The post-flood assessment conducted by the district administration, the World Bank, the UNDP, the European Union and others showed that more than 4.4 million acres of agricultural land were destroyed and irrigation and flood protection systems were damaged. About 437,000 livestock worth $117 million were lost, and nearly 60% of the road network was undermined. Moreover, a total of 2.36 million houses were destroyed, affecting 12.36 million people, including 650,272 partially damaged houses and 1.44 million fully damaged houses. In addition, 2,548 government buildings lost their shape, representing nearly 83% of the total nationwide figure. Sindh alone suffered a huge loss of $5.5 billion in the housing sector alone. However, the Sindh government's aggressive response to the natural calamity reduced the impact of the destruction. The Sindh government immediately executed the emergency relief activities through the Provincial Disaster Management Authority in association with District Administration, Pakistan Army, Pakistan Navy, Pakistan Air Force and paramilitary forces for prompt evacuation of stagnant water. The aid and assistance received from local and foreign sources were distributed among the affected people. It includes supply of clean drinking water, 1 million tents were distributed, 630,000 plastic tarpaulins, 3.95 million mosquito nets, 2.55 million ration bags, 1.84 million blankets, sanitation kits, and a lot more essential items for daily living. During the flood and rain emergencies, 26 mobile hospitals were deployed in 16 districts to provide health facilities to the flood and rain affected people. More than 190,000 people were treated with free medicines, and more than 20,000 lab and other tests were conducted by the mobile hospitals only in 46 days of the emergency. To ensure effective operation and maintenance of these mobile hospitals, we have allocated rupees 556 million for the financial year 2023-24. UNHCR and UNFP also assisted with the supply of food items to the affected areas. In addition, we are grateful to the federal government who distributed through the Benazir Income Support Program. And Mr. Speaker, and all the colleagues here would remember that after the shahadat of Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, President Asif Ali Zardari initiated the Benazir Income Support Program. This has been a flagship program for all governments since then. And this flagship program which President Zardari started, this was the vehicle which enabled the federal government to provide assistance to the flood affectees in a swift and efficient manner. So I'm grateful to the federal government, I'm grateful to the Benazir Income Support Program for providing the necessary immediate cash relief to the flood victims in the province of Sindh as they did in the rest of Pakistan. So Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, even after Shahadat, is in everybody's hearts in the entire Pakistan, and it was due to Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto that this money was available to the people. And as I said, President Asif Ali Zardari, who had initiated this program, he should be given all the credit for giving us such a vehicle which we can immediately use and provide flood assistance to people. So the government of Sindh, in addition to the immediate relief, we have negotiated, and I'll talk in more detail later on, about $1.7 billion from the World Bank for 5 projects, and we secured another $200 million from the Asian Development Bank. I'll talk in more detail about this later. So before I move to the budget numbers and the budget of 2023-24. I want to apprise the House about the global and national economic nosedive that we faced in the last few years. Sir, it is imperative for me to apprise the August House about the existential crisis the government is currently going through due to the dismal performance of the previous federal government, both in terms of geopolitics and geoeconomics. The subversive national economic policies, governance failure, excessive external borrowing, foreign policy fiasco, and monetary and fiscal policy debacle coupled with global economy meltdown due to enormous challenges like inflation, climate change, the war in Europe, and supply chain disruptions due to COVID and geopolitics caused severe economic problems, inflated commodity and utility prices, surging oil prices, and unfortunately rising consumer price index. ये पिछले जो 3 साल गुजरे हैं सर, एक और चीज मैं इधर बताना भूल गया. The key to progress is stability. By the grace of Almighty Allah, because of the leadership of the Pakistan People's Party, Sindh has remained stable for the last 5 years. आजकल लोग इस्तेकाम की बात कर रहे हैं, हम तो इस्तेकाम खुद हैं जी, हमने आपको दिखाया है. आपको मैं स्टेबिलिटी की क्यों बात कर रहा हूं? ये मेरा 5वां बजट है इस साल. एक ही फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर, फेडरेशन में इन 5 सालों में 6 फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर्स गए. तो इस्तेकाम लाएगी पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी, लाएगी, सिंध में ला चुकी है, इंशाल्लाह ताला फेडरेशन में लाएगी. और इन पिछले खास तौर पे पहले 3.5 सालों के दौरान इन्होंने समझा कि जो अपनी शक्ति करे, यू योरसेल्फ स्टिल अ विक्टिम ऑफ दोस, और जो तंग कर रहे हैं पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी को, तो शायद पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी जैसे ये रेत की दीवार की तरह कुछ पार्टी एक बिखर गई अभी, ये कुछ होगा. लेकिन मुझे यहाँ अगेन मैं आज हिम्मत इसलिए कर रहा हूँ, उधर सारे दोस्त बैठे हैं, कि शेरो शायरी मेरा इट्स नॉट माई फोर्टे, आप सबको पता है. लेकिन अब ना रऊफ सिद्दीकी है, ना दूसरे फेडरल मिनिस्टर बन गए, अब इनमें दम नहीं है. फैसल सलवारी है. तो मैंने आज इस्तिदा की है कि कुछ शेर और शायरी मैं भी कर लूँ. नहीं तो हमेशा मैं गलतियां कर जाता हूँ, आज भी शायद करूंगा, लेकिन हर वक्त सीखने का कभी काम खत्म नहीं होता. तो मैं फहीम जोगापूरी का एक शेर पढ़ना चाहूंगा, जो कि इस मुनासिबत से कि जिन्होंने कोशिश की थी. वाकिफ कहां जमाना हमारी उड़ान से, वो और थे जो हार गए आसमान से. हम और ज्यादा ऊंचा उड़े हैं इन 3.5 सालों में. उसके बाद और इसकी प्रूफ मिली है अभी जब इलेक्शंस हुए हैं लोकल गवर्नमेंट की, पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी ने सारे सिंध के सब डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स को स्वीप किया है. तो जितना दबाओगे, शहीद जुल्फिकार अली भुट्टो की पार्टी, शहीद मोहतरमा बेनजीर भुट्टो की पार्टी और ऊंचा उड़ेगी इंशाल्लाह. Sir, it is unfortunate that the people in Sindh have to endure fallout of ever higher inflation at about 40%, with negligible anticipated growth rate for next financial year, while fuel and energy prices have also risen up to 50%. Mr. Speaker, a weak economy is always prone to setbacks in negotiation with IMF and development partners for its inability to fulfill compelling demands for signing hardened terms only for the sake of strengthening foreign exchange reserves, as Pakistan has been facing since natural disasters entrapped the nation. However, despite being entangled by multiple crises, Sindh proved to be a responsible federating unit and consented to fiscal management to maintain a cash surplus of rupees 184 billion for the current financial year 2022-23, according to the federal government's commitment with the IMF to secure the required bailout package. Notwithstanding all this, the Pakistan People's Party's dauntless and unwavering resolve to face crisis converted threats into opportunities. We revised the entire development portfolio and set priorities aligned with the emerging post-flood demands We recognize the need for adaptability and strategic decision-making. We carefully evaluated our priorities, ensuring that every rupee invested delivered maximum value. Our commitment to the people of Sindh remains unwavering, and we will spare no effort in overcoming the current economic challenges as we take inspiration from this quote of the father of the nation, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and I quote, "With faith, discipline and selfless devotion to duty, there is nothing worthwhile that you cannot achieve, and inshallah we will achieve." May Almighty Allah bestow us with the courage and capacity to serve the people of Sindh on the vision and principles set forth by our founding father, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Quaid-e-Awam Shaheed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Quaid-e-Jamhuriyat Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto. They strove relentlessly to achieve these goals. Now, under the dynamic leadership of PPP Chairman Bilawal Bhutto Zardari and President Asif Ali Zardari, the Pakistan People's Parties and its government continue to work to make Sindh a perfect model of a true welfare state. I'll also like to thank, though the Muttahida Qawmi movement is not in coalition with us here in the provincial government, but the Muttahida Qawmi movement is in coalition with us at the federal level. So I'd like to thank the Muttahida Qawmi movement, its leader Khalid Maqbool Siddiqui, Prime Minister Mian Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif, and other political parties who have worked with us during these difficult times. Mr. Speaker, now I'd like to present before the House the revised estimates of 2022-23. Revised estimates for provincial expenditures have been proposed to be 1.76 trillion for the year 2024 as against the budget estimates of 1.713 trillion in financial year 2022-23. It includes current revenue, capital and development expenditure. Revised estimates for 2023 for current revenue expenditure have been pitched at rupees 1.297 trillion, representing 8% increase against budget estimates of 1.199 trillion. The increase is mainly due to additional expenditure incurred on rain and flood relief and rehabilitation activities. Revised estimates for the year 2022-23 for current capital expenditure have been proposed at rupees 62.13 billion, showing 8% increase over budget estimates of rupees 54.481 billion for the year 2022-23. The increase is due to worsening rupee-dollar parity from Pak rupee 186 to almost Pak rupees 300, raising the expenditure by rupees 7.6 billion towards repayment of loans. The estimates for investment activities have been revised to rupees 21.5 billion as compared to budget estimates of rupees 23.6 billion. So the revised development expenditure for 2022-23 stands at rupees 406.32 billion. This is the highest ever development expenditure that inshallah we are going to achieve this year. Prior to this, it was 2017-18 that we achieved the highest. Then I told you, कोई आ गया और 3-3.5 साल हमारे ऐसे गए, 1 साल हमें रिकवर करने में लगा. इस साल we are back on our feet despite floods. Despite so many other challenges, we've had the highest ever development expenditure. And I'll talk about next year also. So the overall receipts, the federal transfers have increased from the federal transfers that we hope to get from the federal government by the end of the year are 1.08 trillion rupees against a budget of 1.055 trillion. Revised estimates for divisible pool component stands at 982.54 billion against budget estimate of 958.62, and for straight transfers at rupees 71.15 billion against budget of 70.82 billion. As I said, we expect to receive this budgeted amount by the end of the current financial year. As far as own resource revenues are concerned, we are going to pitch the revised estimates at rupees 358.29 billion against a budget estimate of 374.5 billion. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to tell you that yet once again, the Sindh Revenue Board, inshallah, will meet its target of rupees 180 billion by the end of this year, and I'll tell you about our targets for next year. Non-tax revenues have been, the revised estimates for non-tax revenues have been proposed at 23.29 billion. The revised estimates for foreign project assistance have been proposed at rupees 147.82 billion, while federal PSTP has been estimated at rupees 14 billion. The budgetary support grant relating to education sector stands at 9.04 billion in the current financial year. Sir, before I go to the numbers for the next year and give you some details of next year's budget, I want to present to the August House a vision for our vision for financial year 2023-24, a vision for an empowered and inclusive Sindh. Pakistan People's Party is a democratic and progressive party. It believes in ideology of inclusive governance. It envisions a progressive Sindh where institutions, policies and services are accessible, accountable and responsive to all members of the society. True reflection of this philosophy can be observed in budget estimates of 2023-24. Mr. Speaker, in order to get to a budget which is acceptable not only by this House but by the people of this province, a pre-budget assembly session was held under Rule 143 of the Rules of Procedure of the Provincial Assembly of Sindh. Let me remind all of you here that we are the only House, the only assembly who has rules for a pre-budget session. The other three provinces or the National Assembly does not have any such rule. So, sir, this pre-budget session was held during the months of January to March for general discussion on the upcoming budget and getting well-considered suggestions of the honourable members of this House. It helps in setting budget priorities according to ground realities and actual demand and needs of people. The invaluable feedback and suggestions have been duly incorporated while finalizing budget estimates of 2023-24. Mr. Speaker, the Government of Sindh developed a tool for citizens' budget in the fiscal year 2021-22. It provides statistical analysis of findings of a survey conducted to gather feedback from the intelligentsia, serving officers, scholars and academicians, and the general public. It has transformed the conventional budgeting process into participatory decision-making, whereby public opinion on prioritization of public expenditure and improving ways and means for revenue generation have been well considered in finalizing budget estimates of 2023-24. We have conducted awareness sessions this year in reputable institutions like Sakhar IBA Karachi, Applied Economics Research Centre Karachi, and the Commissioner's Office Hyderabad to inform people about the significance of the activity and its effectiveness in developing a solution based on the insights, opinions and suggestions shared by intellectuals. Intellectuals, scholars, researchers, stakeholders and citizens. A total of 356 persons, including 240 males and 107 females, participated to provide feedback through questionnaire. The feedback and invaluable suggestions have been transformed into budget estimates for the year 2023-24. The findings of the survey and its analysis are published every year along with the annual budget of the province, and you'll find that in your books. Sir, now I present to the House the budget estimates for the next year. Budget outlay for provincial expenditures for the financial year 2023-24 is rupees 2.237 trillion. This marks a 35% increase over budget estimates of 1.713 trillion in the current financial year 2023-24. I would like to briefly present the components of current revenue, capital and development expenditure. Budget estimates 2023-24 for current revenue expenditure have been pitched at rupees 1,411 billion, being 17.65% higher than budget estimates of 1.199 trillion for the year 2022-23. So the increase is mainly due to massive recruitment of the government, especially in the education sector, and I'll talk more about that, causing the employee-related expenses to take a sharp leap. I just want to mention the few areas where we have put in the most budget as far as the current revenue expenditure is concerned. The highest budget has been allocated to school education of about 267.5 billion, followed by health, almost 228 billion rupees, followed by law and order in the home department, 143 billion rupees, and local government, which is 112 billion rupees. The current capital expenditure has been proposed to be rupees 136.256 billion, with an increase of 150% over budget estimates of 55.481 billion for the year 22-23. This increase may be linked with excessive repayments of interest amount due to hike in foreign exchange rate, as I mentioned earlier, raising the expenditure disproportionately. The budget estimates for investment activities have been proposed at rupees 88 billion, including inter alia rupees 26 billion earmarked for Sindh pension fund and rupees 58 billion reserved for bridge financing of various public-private partnership-led development projects through viability gap fund, depicting an increase of twice more than budget estimates of rupees 23.6 billion for year 2022-23. The budget estimates for the year 2023-24 for provincial development stands at an unprecedented and a record rupees 701 billion against a budget estimate of 459 billion in this current financial year. So inshallah ta'ala, we hope to spend more than 700 billion rupees in development funds in the next financial year. I'll talk more in detail about this. In terms of federal transfers, as you are aware, most of our income depends on transfers from the federal government because they have the major tax collecting authority. We hope that the budget estimate of federal transfers, which have been set at 1.353 trillion for the financial year 2023-24, including 1.255 trillion for divisible pool component and 64 billion for straight transfer and rupees 33.74 for OZT grants. This estimate shows an increase of 27% over the estimate of 1.055 trillion in the current financial year. The provincial receipts, we've done some fiscal reforms we've implemented to mobilize provincial revenues to curtail budget deficit. The augmented collection is expected in the next financial year. Therefore, we have proposed budget estimate of rupees 469.9 billion for tax revenues for the financial year 2023-24. We have set quite ambitious targets for next year for major revenue streams. Next year's collection target for Sindh sales tax on service has been pitched at rupees 235 billion. It is a difficult target, but I am sure that Sindh Revenue Board will be able to achieve this target. Likewise, the revenue collection for levies under excise and taxation are pitched at 143 billion and under Board of Revenue at rupees 55 billion. We estimate a non-tax revenue of rupees 32 billion for the next financial year. Other receipts that we hope to get for our budget assistance in the next year 2023-24 include a foreign project assistance of rupees 26.69 billion. This is unprecedented. This is more than double of what we've ever pitched before. And I'll talk about it later when I talk about our World Bank funding projects. The funds have come from, as I said, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the USAID and JICA. Budget estimates for projects offered under federal PSDP stand at rupees 21.9 billion and for budgetary support at rupees 5.92 billion. Here I would like to mention that the federal government about a week ago had only allocated 6.6 billion rupees for federally funded projects to be executed by the government of Sindh. This was the 2nd of June when the annual plan coordination committee met. We strongly objected to the small allocation to the Sindh government for this, and as a result, this has been increased almost by 4 times, and now we are promised 21.9 billion rupees for provincially executed projects in the federal PSDP. So from 6 billion, we've jumped to almost 22 billion in the last 1 week or so when we objected to this, and I'm grateful to the federal government to have partly accepted our proposals. I am not happy with this. I am grateful to my party leadership who emphasized upon the federal government that they have to treat Sindh at par with other provinces. Unfortunately, that has not been the case in the last 4 years. And in this last year also, we have a lot of reservations, but I will not talk about this here today. There will be other avenues, there will be other forums where I will raise my voice. So before going into details of the development expenditures for next year, because I'm sure everybody is interested in that, I'd like to talk about the flood devastation. I've briefly spoken about this, but I'd like to talk about this in a little more detail before we go to the actual development expenditures. I'll talk about the catastrophic floods of 2022 and the Sindh government's response. So these floods were described by none other than the Secretary General of the United Nations as a monsoon on steroids. The climate catastrophe affected over 33 million people in the country. Under the unprecedented rainfall in July and August of 2022, Sindh was the most affected province, with 70% of the land submerged and over 12.4 million people affected. The devastation caused havoc on almost all facets of life in the province. It damaged more than 2 million houses, standing crops on almost 4 million acres, about 20,000 schools were damaged, and there were damages in several other sectors. 24 out of the 30 districts of Sindh were declared calamity hit. And when this flood came, and I'll talk very, very candidly, after visiting the flood areas where I for one saw water everywhere, water which had no place to recede, I sort of lost hope. And I'm grateful to my cabinet colleagues and members of the Provincial Assembly, other political parties who went to the affected flood people, held their hands, and helped them in all possible ways. और उस वक्त फैज़ अहमद फैज़ का एक शेर याद आया. मैंने कहा ना, I literally lost hope. और ऐसी कुछ थी बात के ये शेर मुझे याद आया कि दिल ना उम्मीद तो नहीं, नाकाम ही तो है, लंबी है गम की शाम मगर शाम ही तो है, और उस शाम के बाद सुबह आई. बहुत मेहरबानी. Really Sir, in addition to providing immediate relief, which I talked about earlier, the government of Sindh, along with its partners, also focused on mobilizing resources for recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction. Federal Ministry of Planning and Development, along with Provincial Planning and Development Department and line departments, coordinated effectively to undertake the post-disaster needs assessment to quantify the damage and losses that were estimated to be more than $20 billion in Sindh, constituting about 70% of the country's damage and losses. The assessment was completed on 28th October 2022. The water was still there, but we completed our assessment. However, the flood water, as I said, had not receded by that time. Government of Sindh proactively worked on developing its own strategic action plan. The flood response aligned with the contours of the National 4R Resilient Recovery, Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Framework, which assessed the financial needs of the province at about $11.6 billion. The post-disaster need assessment, however, formed the basis of Pakistan's advocacy at the Climate Resilient Pakistan Conference held in Geneva on 9 January 2023, where multilateral and bilateral partners pledged $10.96 billion to help the country with post-flood recovery and reconstruction. Even though we reoriented about rupees 87 billion of the provincial ADP towards flood rehabilitation, the substantial financial gap in meeting the reconstruction needs remained. Within a month after the conference in Geneva, the government of Sindh organized the conference on Resilient Sindh from pledges to reconstruction on 8 February 2023 in Karachi, which was chaired by Foreign Minister and Chairman Pakistan People's Party Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. We had over 300 participants comprising multilateral and bilateral partners, along with leading figures from the private sector and NGOs to encourage them to invest in infrastructure development. Within record time, the Government of Sindh worked with development partners, especially the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, in conceiving projects of over rupees $2 billion for post-flood recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction. The government's focus is centered on providing low-cost climate-resilient housing, reviving agricultural activity and livelihood, including livestock, rebuilding damaged irrigation infrastructure, rehabilitating damaged provincial highways and internal road infrastructure, restoring water and sanitation, and rehabilitation of damaged education and health facilities. The World Bank supported project Sindh Flood Emergency Reconstruction Project aims to deliver owner-driven multi-hazard resilient reconstruction of core housing units in 24 flood-affected districts of Sindh. Financial assistance of rupees 300,000 and rupees 50,000 respectively is provided to affected people whose houses have been fully or partially damaged. Estimated damaged houses are about 2.1 million. However, in the first phase, 350,000 housing units to be dispersed financial assistance for fully and partially damaged houses. Mr. Speaker, our founder, Chairman Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto said, and I quote, "It is not the walls that make a city, it is the man who makes it." For the Government of Sindh, this housing reconstruction project signifies more than just rebuilding homes. Pakistan People's Party believes in empowerment of the people of Sindh. Therefore, the Chairman Pakistan People's Party has directed us that every affected person will be awarded title to the land on which his house is built. This is a huge task which Chairman Pakistan People's Party has given to the Government of Sindh, and inshallah ta'ala, under his guidance, we will complete this task. The Government of Sindh is also undertaking another comprehensive Sindh flood emergency rehabilitation project with the World Bank's assistance. Under this project, we have so far plugged 208 breaches and rehabilitated 11 small dams. Other drainage works will be carried out important works will be carried out in 2023-24. Under this project, we will also construct 168 roads having a total length of 932.85 kilometers in 19 districts, restore 2,904 water supply and drainage schemes, and provide cash transfers to rupees 7,500 each to 850,000 vulnerable households in areas affected during floods in 2022. We have all this financing available, as I told the Cabinet earlier today. The project also supports expansion of Sindh Emergency Rescue Service 1122 in 9 additional districts. 10 districts are already covered. Further 15 satellite stations on highway and motorways will also be established to address the casualties caused in road accidents. With the assistance of the Asian Development Bank, the Government of Sindh is undertaking emergency flood assistance project to improve 805 kilometers of flood/rain affected roads for rehabilitation in numerous villages and towns covering thickly populated areas. Under the Sindh Water and Agriculture Transformation Project, the Government of Sindh has registered 296,819 farmers with a target area of more than almost 2.1 million acres for wheat subsidy. This includes 234,000 farmers having land up to 12.5 acres and 62,812 farmers having land from 12.5 to 25 acres. The Government of Sindh is also undertaking 2 critical human capital centered projects with the World Bank. These are the Strengthening Social Protection Delivery System in Sindh project, which will improve health and nutrition service and implement a conditional cash transfer program for pregnant women and mothers of child under 2 years of age during the first 1,000 days of life. The project will benefit about 1.3 million pregnant women and mothers of children aged under 2 years in 15 districts of Sindh. The Sindh Integrated Health and Population Project will rehabilitate and upgrade 392 government dispensaries, 97 rural health centers, 39 Tehsil headquarter hospitals, 20 public health and community midwife schools, and reconstruct fully damaged 121 basic health units. Government of Sindh extends its, this would not have been possible, whatever we have done. As we said, we worked very hard, but as you know, in order to get $1.2 billion from the IMF, the federal government has been working hard for the last several years. In just 3 months, 3 to 4 months, we were able to formulate projects and get approvals for almost $2 billion from the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. And I want, during this budget speech of 2023-24, extend my appreciation for Mr. Naji Ben Hassin, Country Director, World Bank. I believe I saw Abid sitting somewhere there. Thanks to you and your entire team for the unparalleled support in materializing the project for post-flood recovery and reconstruction. Sir, I'll also thank the Group Executive Director for Pakistan at World Bank, Washington, and ex-Finance Secretary of the Government of Sindh, Mr. Naveed Kamran Baloch, who helped us immensely during the approval process in Washington, D.C. We are also thankful to the unwavering support of the Asian Development Bank, the United Nations agencies, and all other international partners who supported the government's efforts during and after the devastating floods of 2022. Sir, even though we have accomplished a lot, much more is still required to be done. I am thankful to the federal government for pleading the nation's case on all international forums. My cabinet colleagues, they worked overtime to ensure timely completion of all formalities. The Chief Secretary Sindh's role was instrumental in steering all the activities. Chairman PND Board and his entire team worked diligently in reorienting the annual development plan in the wake of floods and negotiating remarkable support from the development partners for flood emergency projects in record time. I also would like to appreciate the efforts of the Irrigation Department, Works and Services Department, Agriculture, Health, and all other departments for education, and all other departments for proactively working on conceiving and executing the post-flood rehabilitation projects and initiatives. However, the momentum of earmarking and mobilizing substantial local resources for resilient recovery must continue to deal with the mammoth task of building back better in the aftermath of this climate catastrophe. Sir, I'll very briefly talk about the 2022-23 expenditure on the development side. As I told you, inshallah, our development expenditure will stand at a record 406 billion rupees for this current year 2022-23. This includes a provincial ADP expenditure of rupees 226 billion, district expenditure of ADP of rupees 20 billion, 147.8 billion of foreign project
assistance. There is order in the house, आप बैठ जाएं जरा, you disturb ना करें.
Rupees 12.5 billion for federal PSDP schemes. The provincial ADP of 2022-23 comprised of 4,158 schemes, including 253 billion for 2,506 ongoing schemes and 79 billion for 1,652 new schemes. Sir, this year, though we had the floods, we had huge inflation problems, and because of that we had to revise our rate schedules, and the development process almost stopped for a few months because the contractors were not willing to work on the old rates, so we had to revise the rates. Despite that, in the history of the province of Sindh, we have completed the highest number of development schemes in this year of 2022-23. I think it's 762, I've forgotten the exact number. 772 or 762 schemes have been completed. Prior to this, the highest was again in 2017-18, but we've surpassed this year despite all the problems. So I'll just go straight to the next financial year. The provincial development portfolio for the year 2023-24 comprises 5,248 schemes, containing 3,311 ongoing scheme with provisions of 291.727 billion and 1,937 new schemes with provisions of 88.27 billion. So we are focused on completion of ongoing schemes for which 80% of the budget has been dedicated. The increased size of foreign assistance project is due to initiating new projects for rehabilitation and reconstruction of flood damaged infrastructure, as I told you. So I'll just, instead of the policy statement is here, I'll just tell you the major areas where we are doing the development. The Works and Services Department, we are going to spend 89.3 billion rupees on reconstruction of roads from the provincial ADP. I'm just talking about the provincial ADP here. The local government department has been allocated 62.5 billion rupees. The irrigation department has been allocated 35 billion rupees. School education department 16.5 billion. Health 19.7 billion. And all these details are in the budget book and also in my budget speech. So, I'd briefly like to talk about, as I said, 2023-24. I will tell the achievements of the Pakistan People's Party government in the last 4 years and then move on to the next year as to how we are going to take this forward, inshallah, in the next year. So beginning the next financial year will mark the end of the current tenure of the Pakistan People's Party government in Sindh. We began to build the province on foundations laid in the first tenure, and at this critical juncture, people recognize and are convinced that PPP's government has made untiring efforts to transform its outlook into a progressive province, Sindh into a progressive province of Pakistan. Overwhelming success of the Pakistan People's Party in the recent local government bodies elections bear ample testimony of our commitment to the noble cause of our forefathers. We are going to leave a legacy of fair play, equity and transparency. The occasion, though, fills us with pride, yet challenges us to face the stark reality of economic uncertainty staring at us. The story of last 5 years is filled with extraordinary happenings that brought unprecedented changes all around the world, mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Pakistan was no exception to it. The changes, both nationally and internationally, have direct bearing on the common man. Despite that, Government of Sindh vows to leave no stone unturned to ensure economic and political stability in the province, contributing its share in the common national effort, which is in line with values and vision of leadership of Pakistan People's Party. So I would like to briefly give the August House glimpses of performance of the Pakistan People's Party government during this current tenure. So education is the most essential investment and acknowledged worldwide as the most powerful agent of change. We aim at improving access to equitable, inclusive and quality education for all. We have earmarked an amount of 312 billion, both revenue and current and development expenditure. The highest goes to education, 312 billion rupees in the budget of 2023-24, representing a 7% increase over last year's budget of 292 billion. Budget of financial year 2023-24 will be utilized on the following activities. Undoubtedly, this year's distinguishing feature remained the recruitment of 58,000 qualified primary and middle school teachers purely on merit through a rigorous competitive testing and verification process by Sakhar IBA and the Education Department. All the teachers have been given pre-posting training and posted in schools according to a prescribed student-teacher ratio policy. In a significant move towards strengthening the education sector, another 2,582 positions have been created for the financial year 2023-24. Side by side, all new appointed primary teachers holding graduate degrees have been upgraded from BS9 to BS14, enhancing the career progression. In the realm of school upgrades, 57 primary institutions have been elevated to the middle schools, while 15 middle schools have been upgraded to secondary schools. In a similar vein, primary school teachers holding graduate degrees have been upgraded from BS9 to basic scale 14 to enhance their career progression. In addition, 150 secondary schools have been upgraded to higher secondary school. To support this, 892 new positions have been approved with a financial implication of rupees 846 million. For colleges, a substantial allocation of rupees 26.78 billion has been kept. This includes rupees 400 million for furniture and fixtures and rupees 425 million for maintenance and repair of college buildings. We are also in the process of recruiting 1,500 lecturers to the Sindh Public Service Commission. Additionally, we are making strides with 23 new colleges, creating 445 new positions and physical assets with a budget of rupees 403 million for the coming fiscal year. We are working on strengthening the Sindh Higher Education Commission, and 23.076 billion have been allocated for Sindh Higher Education Commission for the next financial year. Furthermore, the grant to all public sector universities have been substantially increased from 17.4 billion in the current financial year to rupees 25.2 billion in the next financial year. The Sindh Education Foundation, which is again our star performer, has done commendable work. We have increased its budgetary allocation from rupees 13.2 billion to rupees 15.6 billion in the next year. We have recently started a new initiative. The government of Sindh, through the foundation, has launched a new program named as Accelerated Digital Learning Program. Under this program, Foundation is partnering with Teach the World Foundation with an overarching objective of addressing the challenge of out-of-school children across Sindh, as well as to improve learning and socio-economic gains. The salient features of the joint intervention by SEF and Teach the World Foundation under Accelerated Digital Learning Program include total of 125 micro schools will be established targeting 12,500 learners across Sindh. The learning will be carried out on Android tablets having profile of each student with access to customized learning application using gamification and self-learning models. Government proposes rupees 710 million for the Accelerated Digital Learning Program through Sindh Education Foundation. Sir, I've seen the performance of this myself, and actually we did not start until they did a pilot project from their own funding. And the results that we saw were so promising that we've engaged with them, we are partnering with them, and as I said, 710 million rupees have been allocated for this, and the SEF is going to be administrating this. For distribution of free textbooks, 2.53 billion have been earmarked. In addition, rupees 1.55 billion will be invested towards non-operation of non-formal education centers to address this issue of out-of-school children. Projects of DEEP and Aspire, in order to bolster female literacy, we have allocated rupees 800 million for girl stipends and rupees 140 million for special children. Through the successful negotiations with the European Union, the government has secured budgetary support under the European Union Development Education through enhanced program DEEP with an enhanced allocation. The budget now stands at rupees 8 billion, out of which rupees 5 billion allocated for implementation of education sector plan under DEEP and 3 billion for restoration of flood damaged schools. Similarly, additional support has been obtained from European Union under the program Action to Strengthen Performance for Inclusive and Responsive Education, abbreviated as Aspire, increasing the area allocation from rupees 2.16 billion to rupees 4.14 billion. We have also taken over 5,125 NCHT and BCHS teachers from the federal government and will be providing rupees 1.5 billion annually for their salaries. We are continuing giving grants to public school, and grant and aid to public schools has been increased from rupees 140 million to around 400 million. Furthermore, significant rupees 5 billion to rupees 4.25 million have been set aside for repair and maintenance of schools and colleges respectively. STEFTA's grant for next year is going to be rupees 2 billion for technical education. I come to health, which has been the key performer in the province of Sindh in the last 5 years, and not only in the province of Sindh, I think we are recognized nationally, not only nationally but internationally, for the services that we have provided, especially in tertiary health. Health investment project societies and boost economy with healthy society. Budget estimates for 2023-24 for health services have been proposed to as rupees 214.547 billion for non-development against a budget estimate of 196 billion for the current financial year. We have spent more than 233 billion in current financial year to provide state-of-the-art healthcare infrastructure and easily accessible health facilities to general public and running programs of prevention and control of disease. I will skip, the details here. I'll just go to, what we're doing with other organizations, mostly Sindh government organizations. The grant to SIUT.
Please order in the house. आप लोग बैठ जाएं या बाहर चले जाएं.
The grant to Sindh Institute of Urology and Transplant has been increased to rupees 15.316 billion for the next financial year. This is an increase of 5 billion rupees over current year's allocation. The funds will be utilized in financial year 2023-24 for installation purchase of 2 robotic surgery systems, one in BIUT Shahid Benazirabad and one system in SIUT Larkana, Mehrnisa Medical Complex, Karachi and Sakhar Medical Complex, SIUT. We've given a provision of rupees 6 billion for Peer Abdul Qadir Shah Jilani Institute of Medical Sciences, Gampad, including 845 million for procurement of linear accelerator with integrated high-field MRI for treatment of cancer patients, and rupees 1 billion for procurement of 1 robotic surgical system for treatment of poor patients. For bone marrow transplantation and kidney center, 60 million have been kept for the bone marrow transplant at Dow University Health Sciences, and rupees 200 million will be provided as grant in aid to Kidney Center, Karachi. To Indus Hospital, we are increasing the grant for next year to rupees 4 billion, and in addition, for the expansion of the hospital, we have enhanced the grant in the next financial year to rupees 4 billion. In addition, looking at our public-private partnership experience and our success, we have recently teamed up with another non-governmental organization, the Children of Adam, and constructing a neuropsychiatry hospital, the first of its kind in Karachi, and the land for this has been given it's been purchased by the organization. We've given the land, we've also given some seed money, and they're in the process of, the construction has started, and inshallah we are working with them to give them some hospitals and give them the new hospital that they're building. The huge hospital is going to be in Gadab. They also wanted something in the center of the city, and we're looking at an area in Korangi to give them this, give them this land so they can provide this service. To Jinnah Postgraduate Medical Center, an amount of 7.196 billion along with 2,713 posts have been earmarked in current financial year 2022-23. Besides, following measures have been adopted for providing free of cost quality healthcare service to deprived and marginal segments of society. The bedded capacity of Jinnah Postgraduate Medical Center has been enhanced from 1,100, we doubled it to 2,000, more than doubled it actually, 2,208. Hiring of 1,925 well-qualified and experienced senior doctors, staff nurses and skilled technicians to run the hospital 24/7. Budgetary provisions for financial year 2023-24 have been increased. I can see all my ministers are looking at schemes and not listening to the budget speech.
We are listening, you sir.
Budgetary provision of financial year 2023-24 have been increased from rupees 7.196 billion to rupees 11.217 billion, along with the total of 4,258 posts. Funds will be utilized entirely for the following activities. Sir, the government of Sindh, the province of Sindh, the JPMC, had the unique